Chapter 3 Maths, the love of my life. If my choice of joining the coaching institute career launcher for cracking the CAT exam was strategic, choosing its center was even more so. Ditching the one that was opposite IIT in SDA market in Delhi, I decided to opt for the slightly distinct Kailas Colony Center on account of a very important fact. The girls there were more happening. And I knew very well that this was the last chance for me to find a girl before I go into the rigor of an MBA course and a job thereafter. I have to say that the place lived up my expectations, as this was where I met the love of my life, my wife, Madhuri. Turns out that destiny had a big role to play in getting us together. I was actually supposed to be in a batch that began 15 minutes earlier than the batch I would started to attend erroneously. This was where I first saw one of the most fashionable people I have ever met. My earliest memory of the class at Career Launcher, which was meant to prepare us to study management, concerns the fashion management of this girl who had come wearing a top with multicolored strips that was coordinated with a similar hairband and socks. She also carried a diary with, you guessed it, the same multicolored strips. To say that I was blown away would be an understatement. While I was super confident about cracking the CAT exam, I knew it would require much greater efforts to win her over. All I knew about her at that time was her name, Madhuri Jain, and the fact that she was a NIFT graduate. With just the limited information in true Bollywood style, I proclaimed to my friend Ashutosh Mathur that one day I would marry this girl. An unflattering feedback. While Madhuri was extremely reserved, I didn't let go of any opportunity to speak with her. In fact, I pestered her for a lunch date at the cool hangout place of the time, the Big Chill Cafe in east of Kailash. Because of my perseverance, Madhuri decided to first seek feedback to me from her NIFT colleague Ankita, who had studied with me at a PJ school. She asked Ankita if she knew a guy named Ashnur. Well, her feedback had to go down in history as the most unflattering feedback on me. Ashnur nahi, Ashneer. वो ना एवे ही है, उससे दूर ही रहियो. He is quite unremarkable, stay away from him. These were her exact words. To my credit, despite this, I managed to convince Madhuri to come for lunch, which turned out to be the beginning of many dates we went on subsequently. From the family perspective though, the two of us were as different as chalk and cheese. I came from a non-veg eating Punjabi family, she from a family of pure vegetarian Baniya Jains. I am from a service class background, hers was a well-established business family. I lived in a 200 girls flat, her family had a large bungalow. I have one sibling, she has 5. I came from the metropolis Delhi, she from Panipat. But none of this mattered as I was head over heels in love with her. My first port of call when it came to introducing Madhuri to my family was my Nani, my maternal grandmother. A big proponent of looking at every life situation through a positive lens, she finds her strength from attending satsangs and has even overcome a battle with cancer with her characteristic positivity. Once I had gained her implicit approval, it was time for a bigger task, to have my mom meet Madhuri, a typical Panju mother. She never shied away making her criteria for her would-be daughter-in-law known. The girl should be good looking. This meant fair and therefore loving. Well, Madhuri met those standards for sure. I remember my mom looking at Madhuri from top to toe and later offering me 2 pieces of feedback. The first was that she didn't look like a Baniya, essentially too fair for her expectations of Baniyas. Second, that although she wasn't too tall, she had the confidence of carrying herself in flat footwear. that did all at my end. When it came to convincing Madhuri's side of the family, though it was quite another ball game. For one, we had a bad start. Madhuri's dad had given her a Mitsubishi Lancer along with a driver to navigate her way in Delhi, while the family was stationed in Panipat. When we started dating, we would often go around the city in her car. Drivers are known to cause havoc, and her lived upon this reputation. He took it as a moral responsibility to inform her parents that their daughter was seeing someone. All hell broke loose in Madhuri's family. On hearing the driver's narrative, her dad thought that his eldest progeny had let him down and misused the freedom that she had been given. When he had a little more information about the boy in question, his grouse was further straightened. The fact that I was a Panju who was still to land a half-decent job was a big red flag for her family, especially for her dad and her maternal uncle. Before I knew it, Madhuri's dad had summoned her back to Panipat. It was amid this high drama rocking my personal life that I went on to give my CAT exam. The CAT exam that year was referred to as the Icky CAT, as the paper had allegedly been leaked. In fact, we were informed that we had to sit for the exam all over again. Right after coming out of the examination hall, when the center for the second exam was announced, it turned out to be the same center where I had appeared for my JEE. I instantly knew that there was some cosmic connection and that I would get through. And get through? I did. I was nothing short of euphoric to know that on paper I now had the best academic combination, IIT Delhi and IIM Ahmedabad. Importantly, I thought maybe this could change my standing in the eyes of Madhuri's family. I was hoping that the reputation of institute would rub off on Madhuri's dad and that he would see me in a cooler light. But it wasn't to be, as I realized that for Bunnyas, how much you earn is far more important than your degrees. He was at best non-committal. Being the family-oriented person that Madhuri is, she was certain that if anything had to work out, it had to be with the blessing of her parents. Madhuri allies Ankit Khanna. The one thing that my moving to Ahmedabad did was that Madhuri was allowed to come back to Delhi from Panipat and live in a PG. By now, she had started to work for the designer Satya Paul. All my visits to Delhi from Ahmedabad now supposedly had a pit stop at my IIT Delhi friend Ankit Khanna's house. Raid Madhuri's PG for a day before I headed home to meet my parents. Of course, Madhuri had to be super careful to let me into the PG. The fact that the owner of Madhuri's PG lived in the same building, albeit on another floor, meant that I had to wait till her lights were switched off. For 2 full years, such was the level of adventure we had to be able to meet each other. Life at IIM-A. In the meanwhile, settling in at IIM wasn't particularly easy. Technically, it was the first time that I was living away from home, unless I counted the year I had spent in France while at IIT. As if the rigors of IIM by themselves weren't enough, in the first few days, we also had our seniors play a hawk at us. The period was marked with instructions such as, if you aren't up until 3 am every morning, you aren't cut out to be at IIM. So much was the psychological pressure of fitting in that we had instances of people sleeping with their lights on to make the others believe that they were studying until the wee hours of the morning. I found it all extremely untenable. Even when I was finally told that this was a hoax being played on us, it did a little to improve my perception of IIM. Overall, whereas I had found people at IIT to be naturally super sharp, the folks at IIM seemed more driven. Importantly, while at IIT, people were exploring their potential, at IIM, they were driven by the singular objective of landing a Day 0 job. Clearly, IIM was a zero-sum game and more a placement school than anything else. We were living like crabs, waiting to pull the other down to be able to move up ourselves, something that I detested. That explained why, while I had several batchmates at IIM, there were very few genuine friendships. In fact, most of my friends at IIM were those who had made the journey with me from IIT. If you had to succeed at IIM, the one skill that you need the most was networking, a skill that I didn't quite pride myself on. In fact, I was a socially awkward person and would interact only with people I knew well. Put me in a room full of strangers and I would clam up. At some level, it's the Gemini in me that makes a bit of split personality. The long and short of the networking story is that while many of my batchmates successfully networked with the prestigious Goldman Sachs summer internship in New York or Tokyo, I had to make to do with summer's placements at KPMG despite of my academic grades, which didn't go down very well with me. Comes the second year, and things finally started to get better. This was largely because the final placements were dependent only on first year's grades. There was, therefore, that much less reason for people to pull each other down. I began to notice far friendlier and more relaxed versions of the very same people who were out to get you in the first year. In fact, this was the one time that I also stepped out of my comfort zone to explore things I never thought I would do. I became a part of exchange committee at IIM and even participated in a play where I essayed the role of a Yunat-Sakhi of Moharni, something that wasn't quite up my alley. Another interesting event that I remember from those times is the visit of Vijay Malviya, the beer baron, to our campus. Sauntering into the auditorium gallery and received a standing ovation. When he spoke, he left an impact on us on account of his candidness. He reminisced about how he had lost his dad when he was 25 and how that suddenly pushed him into full media glare, asking us whether a 25-year-old would be more inclined towards parties or satsangs. He explained how the media had built his playboy image only because he was seen frequenting some parties and it suited their narrative. The larger point he made was that in India, our natural view of well-to-do businessman is that he must have used unfair means to amass his riches, and therefore we are reluctant to celebrate success stories in India. Even though the subsequent turn of events in Malviya's own life didn't stand up to his theory, the lesson still holds. Day 0. Soon it all was time for the famous Day 0, a creative mathematical nomenclature at IIM, referring to the day when big recruiters visit the campus. This was the day we had firms such as Lehman Brothers, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, and the like making an appearance. But for me, Day 0 turned out to be quite anticlimactic, as to my immense embarrassment, I couldn't crack a single job. My way of coping with this huge setbacks was to switch off my phone, hit the bed and sleep, until I was literally shaken up by my batchmates who informed me that Barclays wanted to have another interview round with me. Having shortlisted candidates at IIM Ahmedabad, they had proceeded to IIM Calcutta with a view to selecting some students from there. Having found a difference in quality, they were now keen to enlist some more students from Ahmedabad. If anything, this only prolonged the misery for me, as I didn't make it through the second round either. What I did have subsequently on day 1 was a good interview with Kotak Bank. In fact, the interviewer was an IIM Ahmedabad graduate himself, and I marveled at him for asking some technical finance-related questions, as opposed to the stereotypical, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? The answer to which is generally as meaningless to the interviewer as it is to the interviewees. My stint at IIM had made me realize that finance मुझे चमकाता है. I quite loved the subject. What also excited me about the Kotak opportunity was that by now I was very certain that I didn't want a consulting role. In fact, if anything, I had an inherent hatred for consultants. Baaton ka khate hain. They made money from creative storytelling, a task I wasn't up to. The job at Kotak, on the other hand, would help me hone my chops at hardcore finance. What also tilted the balance in favor of Kotak was the fact that at the time it had a joint venture with Goldman Sachs. If I hadn't been able to make it to Goldman Sachs, I thought I was at the next best place. Only ironically, I didn't know then that by the time I would join Kotak, its JV with Goldman Sachs would have come on to an end. This analysis, notwithstanding, the absolute best thing about having this job was that Madhuri's dad finally saw some value in me and agreed to meet my parents. A monsoon wedding. In the interim years, while I was in IIM, Madhuri's family had been receiving a lot of rishtas, and great ones at that, from rich, loaded Baniya households. Somewhere, however, her dad had come to believe that if Madhuri had chosen someone for herself, perhaps it was for the best. With my having landed a good job, my stakes improved further. My offer from Kotak was for an annual CTC of 8 lakhs with a 3 lakh assured bonus. The way that job was sold to us, however, was that there was a possibility of making 150 to 200% bonus, thereby pegging the total annual earning potential at rupees 20 lakh. When I tried to sell the job to Madhuri's dad similarly, his reply was, "Jitne ki lagi hai, utne ki baat karo. Let's discuss what you have in hand currently." I realized how rooted in reality Baniya businessmen are. While we are taught to be optimistic, they have been able to make their mark while being realistic. Well, rupees 20 lakh or not, courtesy of the job, I was officially engaged on 14th April 2006. Having agreed to the wedding, my father-in-law was in a great hurry to fix the wedding date. I joined Kotak's Mumbai office on 14th May, and I was back in Delhi in time for my monsoon wedding on 4th July. While my cousins really cursed me for having agreed to get married at worst time of the year, I wasn't taking any chance. बहुत पापड़ बेले थे शादी करने के लिए. It had been one hell of struggle to reach this place. Incidentally, Madhuri's maternal uncle didn't come around and skipped the wedding. The refugee tag couldn't be wiped off even with a decent offer.